Hey everyone, welcome back to part 2 of my quick 2-part video regarding PvP. This video will focus strictly on competitive. As I mentioned at the end of the previous video, if you prefer to have the script to read and then use my compliments as a supplement to it, or just have both up at the same time, down in the description there will be a link to the full script so you can read along if you choose to. So we're just gonna go right into it per normal, and issue 1 we're gonna talk about is maps. So outside of not getting new maps in 6 months, there are maps in the competitive playlist that need to be removed immediately that players have been asking for. Those maps are Equinox, Legion's Gulch, Vostok, and Convergence. So Equinox promotes very stagnant gameplay due to how the map flows. People sit atop A and C bridge and shoot across, as pushing down into B is far too dangerous due to being open to multiple sight lines from near every direction. It's also very easy for a team to lock down another in their spawn, as the major spawn locations for A and C all lead into an open pit. There's 3 exits, they all lead into the same pit. Another reason spawn trapping is an issue is due to it being very easy to get split spawned. Locking down an enemy is 10 times easier when you're only fighting half of them a majority of the time. Legion's Gulch has its issues of spawn points just not being beneficial to the player. The best route is holding A and C, and heavy spawns in between those points. The only way to break an A and C hold is to push through mid-bridge against B, where the team will have heavy, or through man cannons, where once landing from the man cannons you pretty much can't fight for a short period of time. So it's extremely hard for a team to break the A and C point once lost, and just makes this an unbalanced and unfun competitive map. Vostok just doesn't play well for countdown. On attack you're pushing uphill into a side favored by defensive sightlines, which ends up players just beelining through mid-cave. There's no effective way to get from dome to tram without spending 10 seconds traveling around the map, while other maps have better routes to take when fighting a plant or defending a plant, main example being Radiant Cliffs. Convergence hits the same issues that are shown in Legion's Gulch and Equinox. B is too much of a power play, and A and C spawns are pits that are hard to break unless the team does a colossal screw up. Power is also provided near B or directly on B, not providing much of an incentive or choice to break out of. For competitive to be a serious environment, the maps and modes need to be the best that Destiny offers, and only those maps. There shouldn't be maps in the playlist that are bad and frustrating, and if there is, they need to be rotated out. Halo is a prominent example of this, as there are always moving maps that players feel are poor out of the competitive experience. So examples of maps and modes that need priority are Burnout for Control, Clash, and Survival, Distant Shore for the same game types, Endless Veil for the same game types, Javelin 4 for the same game types, Meltdown for Countdown only, Radiant Cliffs for Countdown, Clash, and Control, Eternity for Countdown only, Pacifica for Countdown and Clash, and then the Fortress for Countdown, Clash, Survival as a bonus, along with Wormhaven for Clash and Survival and Control. So in total you end up with about 5 to 6 Control maps, 7 to 8 Clash maps, 5 to 6 Survival maps, and 5 Countdown maps. These maps all have better rotations and offer the best experiences for competitive. I'd go as far as to say that Javelin 4, Endless Veil, Radiant Cliffs, and Wormhaven, depending on heavy changes, are the best maps for their respective game modes. They need to have immediate priority in the current game state to provide the best competitive experience for players grinding these modes out. There's some exceptions I added, like Fortress or Clash and Control to Radiant Cliffs, but if these game modes and maps can easily be removed if they prove to not play well compared to the rest on the list. Second major point is Heavy and Suicides. Heavy still needs to be adjusted in competitive, and the next best option would be to reduce the amount of ammo received per pull. An example of this would be to have Wardcliff Coil go from 2 shots to 1, and 1000 Voices go from 3 shots to 2. This would be a good step 1 in decreasing the amount that it plays and factors into carrying over comp matches without completely killing it off. Heavy should be a power point on the map, but not a dominant one. And this, in addition to roaming super changes, would be a great quality of life improvement to how competitive plays on how a heavy operates in these game modes. In terms of suicides, Destiny just needs to punish intentional suicides in comp if the mode is to be taken seriously. Players should not have the incentive of jumping off the map to avoid gunfights. These penalties exist in nearly every other competitive game that exists, but does not in Destiny's most competitive game mode. I want to clarify too, I don't want these penalties in quick play. I don't care about implementing suicide penalties in quick play, but I do want them in comp. Teams should have the ability late game to turn a lead if they're put in a situation that allows it. Gambit currently allows this with the way invasions work to turn the tide on your opponent, but PvP is handicapped as most teams when pushed with adversity will choose the easy way out, being jumping off the map, which removes any risk of having to deal with an engagement they put themselves into. My suggestion is to re-implement loss of token in countdown, lose a point in clash, and lose 3 points in control. Control should be the most punishing as 3 points is equal to 1 power play kill, so if a team does choose to suicide, they are punished equally as such. It's very odd that modes like Survival and Showdown have suicide penalties, but other modes in Destiny don't. Before people use the excuse too of, well, what about accidents or trolls? Nearly 99% of the time, the player suiciding is either player error or intentional. If you suicided in Halo, you are more conscious and aware of your movement. Suiciding in Call of Duty put you in an extended respawn timer, which punished you hard in objective-based game modes. The reason you need important point losses in competitive is, let's just say, for example, we're going to decrease super. If a team is up 6 points at the end of a control map, and they choose the option to suicide because there's 40 seconds left, removing their super doesn't do anything for them, nor is it a sufficient enough risk to provide incentive to not jump off the map. Like it's still more beneficial to them at that point to just jump off the map. They don't lose points for it, they waste your time, there's nothing more for them to gain. If they lose 3 points per death, if they choose to suicide 2 or 3 different people, they now are at a loss and are forced with 20 seconds left to re-engage the enemy to try and even the score out. And that's why this is important. Suicides may naturally drop too once players get a better counter against them, but still players should be held accountable for these mistakes and these actions. The third issue is talking about mods and super mods specifically. They currently just play a 2 dominant role in the PvP sandbox. Previously in Destiny 2 they were diminishing returns after 3, but now they're pretty much diminishing returns after 5, which is kind of bad. They allow roaming supers to be a larger issue than or exaggerate their issues. This is why supers such as Nova Warp in the past, Blade Barrage, and now Spectral Blade are seen as major outliers due to the kill potential they hold with the addition of super mods. This isn't to say supers don't need to be adjusted, but it helps exaggerate the issues that they have. The changes that I would suggest personally would be step 1, super health, and then if it still needs to be toned down, step 2 would be adjusting super mods specifically if still needed. These changes would help widen the pool of viability for mods. In addition, with other changes like roaming super changes, it would be a lot more interesting to see what people would spec for. Titans and Warlocks have the freedom to run 8 resilience, so if Bungie implements damage fall off for different archetypes, would you see more high armor builds to live through roaming counters? Or would you see more melee builds to always have a charged melee up with your special weapon? I understand concerns with PvE, but the loss of this to PvE is greatly outweighed by the negatives it currently holds in PvP. Reducing super gain doesn't negatively really affect PvP in any shape, given the amount of tools that exist now for super and ability regen. Things like rally flags, super orb gens like Skull of Dairam Kara and Tether, or Masterwork orbs from weapons. My goal with this in general is to just make its impact on PvE as little as possible. So the fourth issue as we close out this competitive video is glory points. The ×2 glory points gained and lost was just not a positive change to comp. This helps out in small part up to 2100, as to progress to 2100 you can get by with about a 40 to 45% win ratio. The problem with this is at the top end, so about 3500 plus, you need to win near 2 games to 1, a 65% win ratio needed to progress. You add in the double points on losses, this incentivizes more DDoSing and personal attacks on teams in those ranks, mainly because losing in high ranks becomes too much of a risk to bother attempting. Less and less people will be playing as a result of this, even at low ranks, as the comp population is already horrendously low. My first suggestion is to revert lost points back to their original state, but still hold ×2 glory on wins. Short term, this would be the better option, as reverting losses back allows the win percent at high ranks to be back around 50 to 55%. My point isn't to make comp more favorable for everyone, or easier, I guess is a better word I'm looking for, but bring in the dramatic difference between ranks. Plenty have mentioned how harsh it is at the top to consistently win 2-1, especially with how many good players there are. This just removes taking one loss as being a 2 to 3 game difference, essentially. My second suggestion, and in my opinion the better suggestion long term, is to remove losses altogether. And before you jump at me for this, just hear me out as to why this isn't a bad option either for longevity of the playlist. At this point, we can all mostly admit that the current comp system just doesn't work. It's unbalanced numbers wise, there's no placement matches, and rank based matchmaking with the low population is just not a good time. You can still have wins be the main requirement to progress in this playlist, which still separates it from quick play where you gain points no matter what. This would greatly improve the overall population of the playlist immediately and remove the negative of getting hit offline if Bungie was looking for a way of changing the population drastically. Keep in mind, the whole point of ×2 glory was to improve player population. The other point with this too is 4v4 being based purely on winning is still sweaty and competitive, and there will still be stopgaps for players that aren't as good as others. So the key things to note in this, as there's ways to implement the playlist to still have a time investment. What you do is you remove streaking, and then you have wins give a flat 60 points up to the base win 5500 cap, which is legend. Casual players, or players that aren't as skillful or aren't as hardcore, will still have a significant time investment required to reach 5500 in a given season. If we do some basic math with this, let's say an average comp match takes about 9 minutes. Let's also use the 60 point baseline, so roughly 92 wins are required to hit 5500. If you take 60 times 9, so 60 seconds times what would be 9 minutes, you have 540 seconds. You times that number by 92 wins, you're at about 49,000 seconds. You divide that number by 60, you get about 828 minutes, and then you divide that number by 60 to get the hours, you end up with 13.8 hours. So what this all means is, to hit legend, it would require 14 hours straight of winning to hit legend and competitive, which is not an easy thing to do consistently. This also doesn't show if you don't win 100% of your matches. If you win only 50% of your matches, you could easily double your time. You are then looking at near 28 plus hours of PvP to hit legend in a given season. The casual or non-hardcore PvP player would be wasting significant time to reach this point, and it would be a heavy time investment just like the Redrix's Broadsword quest was. This means players wouldn't be raiding or doing other new activities, and you still have a high time investment required for legend rank. What this does for hardcore players though is improve the queue time of matches, improves the connection quality of your matches over a season, as at the end of the season more people would be making a push. Thus, if you're trying to play legend or you just like the way comp plays, you get better matches, faster period of time. And it also doesn't really remove the option of recovs because the time investment is still there. Let's be realistic, this time investment would be no different than someone grinding to 2100 to get Lunas or Recluse. Good players will still get it done at a fast period of time regardless. Good players would still hit legend in a week regardless if they're as hardcore as they are normally. This also doesn't consider the time requirement on top of rank to obtain things like Recluse, Mountaintop, Luna, or Not Forgotten, or consider the comp armor changes I mentioned in the last video for general replayability. Having the option for more players to achieve but still require massive time is still an overall positive to the game mode, especially considering the health and population of the mode isn't going to improve anytime soon. Changing the point system in general allows more to enter the playlist and make matches more reasonable. This would help the playlist again be healthier long term. When I was chatting with Triple Rec about this, he brought up a good point that I agree with, and that it's important to realize the current implementation of comp just has not worked and it's failed. It wouldn't hurt to look at a more established template for the future with placement matches and a more accurate skill rating. There's got to be a way they can implement placement matches to where if you win 8 out of 10 games, you're put at like 20 out of 50, for example, as a start. And if you win 1 out of 10, you're put at 2 out of 50, just using 1 to 50 as a baseline. Another point that would help the immediate population is to go forward with making base Destiny 2 free, which is also a point that Tefty brought up on the DCP podcast. This would massively boost the population for console and PC, especially if Destiny is going to continue with the annual pass subscription pass model. If we go another year with an annual pass and this change isn't made, the community would just get smaller and smaller, and it would make rank-based matchmaking more and more unreasonable. And then the final point in this video is talking about Not Forgotten, Pinnacle, and Legend rewards. So Pinnacle weapons as a whole should stop being the best options for their class, but excel at being different. Redrix and Mountaintop are prime examples of this, as they provide a benefit but aren't always the best in class option. They work well when you get their exclusive perks to work, but other than that, there's other weapons that can fill that slot just as effectively. 21% Delirium, Loaded Question, Breakneck, and Oxygen we won't consider in this, mainly because Delirium is a heavy weapon, and the other 3 weapons I mentioned have PvE favored perks, and it makes them tough to work in PvP effectively. Recluse is on the fence, but this is more because SMGs as a whole are weak, which is why it's not exactly like a Not Forgotten scenario, but still holds the best in class option. Recluse still has its boundaries with range, but it shouldn't be the reason why SMGs are not buffed. I'm still hoping for another SMG buff to bring 600s, 750s, and 900s back up to some relevance. I don't want to have Recluse be the answer for this, more or less, as to why SMGs aren't getting another buff up. But as someone who has used Not Forgotten and got it legitimately, the gun is a 180, breaks the mold for ease of use, and single-handedly is killing the sandbox on console, and is pretty top tier for PC. As I mentioned in last video, I'm fairly confident that if Ace didn't have the range it had on PC, Not Forgotten would have the same dominant or same effectiveness on PC as it does on console. Players are slowly starting to realize this, and here are my suggestions to not only adjust Not Forgotten, but fix Legend ranks as a whole for the long term. So Not Forgotten should have a dramatic range decrease. Magnificent Howl should be retooled so that it procs a 3-shot up close, being all crits, but at range it's a standard 4-shot kill. This would still have it be ahead of other 180s due to Magnificent Howl compensating for usual 180 damage fall off. The benefit for Not Forgotten, or the benefit that it should provide, is the addition of Zen Moment and having slightly more range than Luna's Howl or 180s as a whole. The range of these 180s should be brought in line with the rest of its archetype, just provide Not Forgotten with 10 more range at its base and then its masterwork to give it a little bit more room to the chance to 3-tap an opponent versus where it stands right now. The main incentive of this, if we refer back to my hand cannon rework, is that instead of 180s breaking into multiple hand cannon archetypes, a 180 could duel, specifically Not Forgotten, or a service revolver with kill clip. It could duel a 150 at its intended range, but it would fall off at a 140 or 110. That way you don't have a Not Forgotten being able to battle all 3 different hand cannon archetypes and be able to do it with ease. Even if you look at the new service revolver with kill clip, as I just mentioned, can still be useful with the reduction in range and filling that replacement Not Forgotten role people still think it provides, without making these 2 options the best in class. It still, with this change, keeps them both viable and defines them in the sandbox without completely removing their PvE utility, which I know everyone is always concerned about when talking about PvP changes. This, in addition to other changes, would help widen the PvP sandbox experience and make it healthier long term, also without providing a massive power curve to the already top 1% of PvP players. The top getting a gun that's night and day the best choice isn't balanced, and it's not competitive by any means. Fighting game tournament winners like Sonic Fox don't just get a character that is exclusive to them and is the best in the game and destroys all other characters and has the best frame data. Call of Duty players like Scump for Optic, they don't get an exclusive gun that doesn't have flinch or has an exclusive perk that destroys every other gun in the sandbox after they win a tourney, because it wouldn't be balanced and that's not competitive. And giving the same weapon to top end PvP players is the same thing. The other point too is trying to balance hand cannons around 3 crits while introducing a hand cannon that does it with the best ease of use and highest fire rate just doesn't balance the sandbox out. It instead creates a massive power curve as to what the player will use. So my personal fix to the problem. So when I mention all these changes to Not Forgotten, there has to be some type of positive to come with it. And my idea for what can replace Not Forgotten in the future as legend rewards is as follows. So Not Forgotten will still be there, but what new legend rewards can we get? So the first one is to allow Luna and other future comp rewards to random roll in packages once you hit legend. So the player must obtain the gun first to be rewarded. There's no free package in the next season. And what the gun would do is keep its exclusive perk, but everything else, including its masterwork, would have a chance to reroll. So everyone has the option for the base 21 version, but if you continue to play your way to legend and you hit legend in the season, you then get the option to random roll, so you can get drop mag changed from Luna, or if you didn't like ricochet rounds on Recluse. It's just a small added benefit, but nothing that's too dramatic of a difference. The other thing, in addition, is to provide an ornament and emblem to use with the gun once you hit legend, similar to what they did for Redrix's Claymore. You make an exotic ornament to be applied to each weapon, and then add an ornament to each existing comp wep atop with the emblem. Aesthetic exclusive still holds weight in the Destiny community. To this day, running the Claymore emblem, people still ask me how I obtained it, where it's from. Having an exclusive emblem for other Pinnacle weapons would also create a similar aspect. If you see someone running it, you know they hit legend to obtain it that season. The same way there can be day 1 raid emblems, there can exist exclusive aesthetic differences in PvP. Mountaintop, Luna, and Recluse can be grandfathered in, as any future weapons will need to be done in the season they are introduced in order to get the ornament, again, the same way as Redrix. What these changes do is allow the incentive to push legend to improve the weapon without providing too massive of a stat curve as Not Forgotten currently provides. In addition, comp point changes will improve the population of the playlist as a whole and the health of PvP. Comp isn't really going to get any better than what it is now. If anything, it's going to get worse, and this way you'll have a healthier population going forward into legend, thus improving the overall loot pool as well as you go for your perfect Mountaintop, Lunar, Recluse, or other weapons. A few other things too is that I didn't really give their own section, or main thing is that comps should be opt-out chat, not opt-in. This is important for communication. Toxic players exist. There's a reason report buttons exist for that reason, but opening the chat lines will make games more reasonable for everyone as a whole. So that'll do it for part 2 of my PvP improvement video. If you stayed through both videos or read, I appreciate it. It means a lot. At the end of the day, I'm a hardcore PvP player, and with the news that Crucible is being worked on, I just want the best thing possible for everyone going forward. There's ways to create a medium of positives between what D1 and D2 has offered to further evolve and create something that everyone will love right off the bat in Destiny 2. Or Destiny 3, I'm sorry. But so with that being said, make sure if you agree with something or disagree, I'm always curious to your thoughts, is this is important to get a game that we want improved. And I think everyone is on the same page now with this news about wanting PvP as a whole improved. So if you want to follow me on Twitter and discuss with me more, feel free to follow me at twitter.com/Wendler34. If you want to follow me on Twitch and talk to me there about it, as I mentioned in the last video, you can follow me at twitch.tv/Wendler. I'm always down to have conversations about PvP and the future of it. And again, I appreciate you guys for watching, and I hope you guys all have a great rest of your day. Wendler out.